speaker series. And welcome to our students that are here in the audience. Thank you for being here. We have popcorn coming up to you in just a moment. So I also want to let you know that our Monday movies are back at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. and 7 o'clock this Friday night, Kathy LaFawn will be on stage. So if you're looking for some live music in a socially distanced atmosphere, come and join us Friday night. And we will launch a musical October 3rd and 4th, Daddy Long Legs. So we're very excited about that. And our children are working hard also with Super Happy Awesome News, which is a virtual musical. So we hope you'll check out our website at waynetheater.org of everything that's going on. We thank you so much for being here. We do ask that you wear the mask as you move throughout the building, but when you're seated socially distanced, you're welcome to take it off at your choice. So we are so excited for tonight's presentation. I'd like to welcome Executive Director of the Virginia Natural History Museum, Mr. Joe Keiper.
Thank you, Tracy. Great to be back at the Wayne Theater. So I get to kick off our third Tuesday Science Talk lecture series. So we've been doing this now for three years now. And tonight I'm really excited to do this because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to give you an update on where we're at with our planning for the Virginia Museum of Natural History and its proposed campus that we're going to build here in Waynesboro. It's very exciting. So, and I'm going to share with you some drawings that have been made public that maybe you haven't seen yet. So we look forward to sharing all that. So I just want to thank them. I want to thank the Wayne Theater. I want to thank everyone who's online tonight on our Facebook page. And I want to thank the Wayne Theater and their crew for getting this tape to be posted online so folks can check this out at their leisure if they miss it now. So let's start with this. Let's start with an idea, and I like ideas. In fact, I like what are called BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, right? So that's what we got to thinking about, 7, 8 years ago now, we began to think about how can we expand our service. Let's look at the Virginia Museum of Natural History. We're located in Martinsville, Virginia, down the south side. We're an awesome museum. We've got these PhD caliber curators learning more about the Commonwealth every day. We have ASA educators going out into the community. We absorb field trips, kids being great informal science lessons underscoring Virginia science standards of learning. So we're doing all this great stuff, but we're isolated. We were doing social distancing before COVID, right? But we were doing it because we were isolated down in southern Virginia. And we do a great job serving that population. But, as far as museums go, it's tough to attract people from long distance. We've developed ways to do that. So we do get punctuated crowds periodically. We have to do more. We have to have that big, hairy, audacious goal. So we decided that it's going to be a branch campus. And what better place to put it but right here in downtown Waynesboro. And I'm going to talk about why Waynesboro. I'm going to talk about how we're going to do this, how we're going to absorb a greater population of Virginia. And speaking of ideas, and I have a member of our Board of Trustees in the audience tonight, and so I'm going to challenge that board member and all of his colleagues. What if we set a big, hairy, audacious goal that at some point in the future, that every Virginian is within 1 hour's drive of a natural history museum experience, right? Why not? So this is going to be sort of the inaugural branch, and I think it would be something that would give us momentum to go even farther. So, but first things first, we have to finish this project. So I have a picture here of the cover of the project we just recently finished, and the state speak it is called a pre-planning study. And we actually went above and beyond the call of duty and created a document that provides a lot of detail about what the Virginia Museum of Natural History branch campus here in Waynesboro would look like and how it would function. Really, though, for the state, the pre-planning study, as far as the officials go, what it is, it's something that allows you to develop cost. And we're thinking that this project will run us somewhere around $21 million or so in today's money. Depending upon where things go and how long it takes for us to get to a point where we hire a contractor and start buying steel I-beams and whatnot, right, you can have price escalation, which could be about 5, 6, 7% per year until we get to a point of build. So I'm going to tell you where we're at now. Now I want you to pay attention to this. This animal here is pretty awesome, man. They walked around here, a big hairy elephant. This is a woolly mammoth, right? And then it also had its relative, the mastodon, that walked right here in the Shenandoah Valley back during the Pleistocene up to about 11,000 years ago. But I want you to remember this guy, right? This is a pretty typical museum skeleton, a mammoth on all fours with a 1,000-yard stare. We want to do better than that. We want to come up with new ideas, right, and be a very place-based museum. In other words, we're going to tell stories that are specific to this area, not the Commonwealth in general, but there are so many great stories to tell about the ecology, the paleontology or ancient life, the past cultures or archaeology and whatnot of this region. There's just an abundance of information that we can put out there, and that's what we intend to do. I'm going to come back to this guy a little later on. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to start with some of the less flashy drawings. Why am I doing that? As a museum guy, what is most important to me is what's inside the building. The building is the content. The building are the collections. The power of real. The Virginia Museum of Natural History down in Martinsville right now is responsible for more than 10 million specimens and objects that represent Virginia's natural and cultural heritage. So we have a great bit of resource that we can build to populate our exhibits. So it's the inside that's important to me, so I want to start with that. We'll get to the outside, the pretty part, the building, what it looks like and everything, which is important. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to downplay it, but for me, it's the inside. It's the experience that the children, the tourists, the visitors, the supporters, what they all get. So what we have here is what we call our first floor, right? So this rectangular building here, as you're going to see shortly as we show you some external images in a few moments, it has a bit of an industrial look to it. If you've ever gone down to, before it's closed, unfortunately closed now, but if you went to a brewery down in Daleville, Virginia, Ballast Point Brewing, you could sit in their beautiful portico with all glassed in. You can look across this lake, and on the other side is this industrial area, and you'll see a building that looks an awful lot like this. Like when we picked this building design, I hadn't been there yet. So my point is that I think this will be a great building design that will match the industrial history of Waynesboro. So it'll be a fantastic structure that will complement what we have here and what the city plans to do in the future. So if you follow my dot here, this is our front entrance right here, and you come into the lobby. The lobby itself is going to be an experience, and I'm going to come back to how it connects to the outside where the visitors first approach the building. But what we have here in the middle is a central stairwell. And have you ever been on Blue Ridge Parkway or Skyline Drive and you look out into the mountainside, you're going to see these gray areas, and they're called talus slopes. They're very unique ecosystems that support local, regional, or we call it endemic biodiversity, plants and animals you can't find anywhere else. So we're going to be celebrating that first and foremost. We'll have a box office and a museum shop. We'll have some infrastructure. That's what I call the restrooms. Right? So we have to support our visitors and so forth, but immediately in the lobby, we're going to go straight to what makes this area of the world special. Part is that there is so much water, and this thing that we call karst topography, the limestone, where you have water flowing under the ground, creating rivers underground, and whatnot. So we're going to talk about the geology and hydrology first off, because it is so fascinating. The stories are so deep. As you move into the museum's exhibits further, we're going to get into an introduction to local biodiversity. We're going to have live plants and animals that are present. So we're talking about the story of the brook trout, right? That is awesome connection to our South River right here in Waynesboro. It's got a very awesome life cycle that is very rich with biological information that we can extract to support Virginia science standards of learning in our own students in the state. Right? We're also talking about having the story of the freshwater eel, right? An animal that migrates. It actually will go out to the ocean, but it actually comes back up into the rivers and moves up into the wintertime. It'll spend its life up in the shallow streams of the mountains. So this thing is something that just travels all across our landscape, including right here in the Waynesboro region, right? And so we're going to connect to a lot of these stories here. If you go deeper into the exhibits, into this corner here, we're going to be focusing on our youngest visitors, our pre-K through maybe 5th grade visitors. We're going to have a 2,000 square foot early childhood learning center that is going to be specific to them. And what you can't really, it doesn't really show up in this picture, but we do have a proposal for a fenced-in kind of play zone that they can go to. But we're going to have science lessons embedded right into those areas and so forth. So in this area, we might have a special spelunking area where kids can go caving and explore for limestone-encrusted fossils. Right? We're going to have areas where they might actually have water play. Oh, get a little wet, but hey, no big deal, right? Water is the basis of life, and what makes the planet Earth special, and Waynesboro and this region of the world is just rich with water resources and so forth. Right? So as you move through the galleries, you come to our classrooms. We're going to be absorbing students who will come to the museum for specific visits. Part of our staffing here is going to be educators that will be, again, underscoring Virginia science standards of learning. Now, we have to have a little bit of support area back here, so we have a loading dock and whatnot that will allow us to help run the building and keep it maintained. As we move further along, right, we can get to this point where we see kind of the general three-dimensional layout of what we're proposing. Now, don't forget, what I want to hammer down here is that as this is pre-planning, we enjoy the right to move into the next phase of our planning and see what works, see what resonates with our staff, with our curators, with our supporters, with the folks up here who will be using this museum. And in doing so, we can modify a lot of this, but this basically shows our view and our general layout as we move through the museum. And we're kind of at 10,000 feet with our exhibit design. That's, again, part of pre-planning. We have a rather extensive exhibit narrative that we've developed, what the visitor will experience as they move through the galleries. But that is something that still, it's something we can mold, it's something we can expand on and so forth. In fact, we're going to be working with constituent groups on specific areas of these exhibits and get input to see what can we do better than we're already proposing. Right? So we want to make sure that this is a communal event. This isn't just, you know, a couple of curators kind of putting their brains out on paper. Right? We want to make sure this is something that's going to be good for all concerned. So this is an example of something that just inspires us. We're probably going to be creating unique exhibit elements, such as this diorama that shows this karst topography that I'm talking about, right? So since this isn't a subject matter that is so rich and so specific to this area, we really want to focus on that. So these exhibits, they're not going to be turnkey. They're not going to be things that are manufactured and that we can just pick up or order from somewhere. They're going to be manufactured to tell our stories here. And that's what makes us really exciting. So we talked about the idea of live fish. This shows kind of one proposed method of doing so. We want to have people get up close and personal with these animals, right? I'll tell you what's worked really well in Martinsville at our Starling Avenue facility there is that it's our homeschoolers that are actually responsible for taking care of our trout. We don't have quite this extensive of a trout system. We've recently expanded it, but that being said, we want to do something that just really just is going to just inspire people to want to learn more about these creatures. But in Martinsville, it's the homeschoolers that are responsible for taking care of our trout. And we'll have dozens, you know, that are available there, and they're going to be feeding them. We teach them how to clean the tank and maintain it and stuff like that. And when the trout get to a certain size, you know, these homeschoolers are youngsters, and what we do is we actually grab up all the trout for one of their days, and we put them in a transport container. And we go over to our version of the South River, the Smith River down in Southern Virginia, and we give all the kids a Dixie cup. And every cup has a trout in it. And we all roll up our pants and take off our shoes, and we go out into the stream, and on the count of 3, we dump the fish down into the river. And the first time I did this, and I wasn't a kid, right? I've been around the block. I've been through a lot of streams. First time I did it, the first thing I saw that amazed me was that the trout schooled up immediately, right on the edge of the river, and we all got to stand there and just watch this whole thing transpire. Now, in the transport container, it was just this tub with a lid on it. It was white on the inside. And in the hour or so, maybe less than that it took us to transport the fish from the museum to the Smith River, the fish had become really pale. I didn't know they were like chameleons. It was awesome just to watch this happen. And as we watched them school up, they turned darker to match the substrate as a camouflage mechanism. So I was learning stuff on the fly. You know, and imagine a 10-year-old, imagine an 8-year-old, imagine a 12-year-old doing this and having taken care of these animals for months on end and then releasing them. That is power of doing real work, working with real organisms, right? So I will say I have zoo envy, because most of the specimens and artifacts I work with, well, they're not alive anymore, right? That's what museum collections are all about. But to be able to have that experience and to inspire them to learn more, there's a quote that someone told me was, how can you care for that which you don't understand? So when we're talking about conserving our natural and our cultural resources, why would you motivate yourself to put that kind of effort into things if you don't understand them? These kids who raised and released those trout will never forget that, just like I didn't forget it 10 years ago, the first time that I did it. So we're also going to try and tie in some other fun things, right? So we have, I'll show you an image here shortly, but we have many insect specimens in our collection, because insects are one of the most diverse forms of animal on the planet. But what if we work with our South River Fly Shop and we actually create displays showing the magic of fly time, and then with that we have the actual specimens from the South River that inspired those flies. So this is something that we're not just going to be all serious about, we're going to have a little fun with it as well. So why are we the ones doing this though, right? Why should we be responsible for putting all the time and sacrifice and funding into producing a branch? Well, we are the one and only institution that can do this. First of all, as I mentioned before, we have 10 million plus inventoried specimens and artifacts that are available, right? We have vast taxidermy collections. So in other words, these kind of dioramas showing animal behavior frozen in time. Again, we have these PhDs and their support staff who are just full of information and wonderful stories about Virginia's natural heritage. And we have an education staff that just can take the science and translate it into a publicly digestible form, perfect for our younger audiences. So this, by the way, is just one row of shells from our wet collection down Starling Avenue in Martinsville, right? So these are aquatic organisms that are cataloged and curated. These are things we can draw on to create exhibits, right? If we move up to the second floor, you'll notice the second floor is perpendicular to the first floor, right? So what you can do is you can come up this central stairwell here, we're an elevator, and in doing so, you're going to come up on our paleontology or our ancient life area. And so we've got some excellent ideas as to how to really connect people to the past world of this region, right? When we move into this other region here, we're moving very strongly into general zoology. But it's not just general zoology, it's how people interact. So we're going to be kind of bleeding into the area of historic hunting and fishing and subsistence living and so forth. And we're even, speaking of subsistence, we're even going to move into pulling upon some of the stories that our colleagues tell. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have what we call our viticulture area. Dr. Carol Nash of James Madison University, she has spent a lot of time documenting the historic viticulture that was initiated by George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, and how there's evidence still remaining today of the way in which they they sculpted the landscape to support grape growing in Virginia. And it's absolutely fascinating. So this is kind of like going to universities, finding the interesting stories that are there, and turning the university inside out, right in the galleries. Right? So that's something that we're really going to focus on. And I'll come back to this in the next slide, but we also have this area here which we call Interconnections. So that was something that was an idea generated by our local educators here. It came to us and said, hey, Keiper, this is something we think you can really help with. So again, moving to this three-dimensional view, I'm going to come back to this area down here. I'm really excited about this mammoth or mastodon story down here. But paleontology is pretty cool. Remember we were talking about karst topography, all the limestone, the underground rivers and so forth, right? I'm going to connect back to that because during the Ordovician of the world, this goes back 420 million plus or minus years, right? This area of the world was a vast shallow ocean with huge biodiversity, and we have tremendous fossil resources here locally. And so to talk about that Ordovician time is going to be something that's really important, and it's something that there are parts of the country you can go to find Ordovician fossil deposits and go collect them quite easily. So they're very abundant and a very important part of Earth's past history. So this kind of moves into our kind of zoology and viticulture area and so forth. We'll also notice down here we don't have any kind of exhibit elements in here, but that's going to be an approximately 1,000 square foot professional laboratory. So we're going to have actual science going on there, and we're going to connect to James Madison University, UVA, Virginia Tech, Bridgewater College, and any other number of potential partners. And we'll have faculty members and our own curators doing work on the South River, the Shenandoah National Park, whatever resources that folks want to be studying. And imagine us putting interns down in here, getting firsthand knowledge of the process of science. On the outside, right here, you actually see a little bit of kind of gardening right here. This is kind of just a schematic look at a pollinator garden that the public can view through windows right here. And so, again, connecting them. One thing that we're going to do, when I say connect them, we're going to connect the inside to the outside, the outside to the inside, right? So we're extremely pleased because what I'm going to show you is how this building will connect to the existing natural resources. So, and then last, I'll just point out before flipping slides here, this again, kind of, we don't know exactly what this will look like, but we have this kind of interconnections area. So, remember that first slide I showed you had that mammoth kind of with the 1,000-yard stare, you know, just sitting there on all fours? Well, I challenge the exhibit design firm Quatrefoil and Associates to come up with something that you can't find anywhere else. And again, I keep coming back to that place-based, find something unique. We're not just going to be kind of cut and dry. So the point is that they kind of came up with this kind of rough sketch of like, why don't we show a Pleistocene hunting expedition, right? And today versus 10 years ago, we know so much more about those. So here we have a rearing hairy elephant. We can use a mastodon or mammoth for this either way, depending on what we want to do. But you notice these guys, they're not using javelins. They're not sitting there hurling spears. That's not the way the humans of North America hunted these big animals back during the time we call the charismatic megafauna of the Ice Age, right? They actually used these things to thrust into the animals. And there have been discovery of stone tools that still have elephant DNA remaining on them from the blood that encrusted them at the end of the hunt. And so they, the scientists who worked on this, they recreated, using flint knapping techniques, they recreated these spearheads and recreated these spears. And they found that they could actually thrust these through the door of a car, right? So this was actually some pretty sophisticated technology for 10 or 20,000 years ago. And so it makes good sense, because to hunt an animal like this, those spears would have to penetrate at least about a ½ meter of soft tissue to get the vital organs to cause the slow death of this animal. And once they got that, they had resources. They were replete with resources. You know, food, materials with which to make tools, the fur, and whatnot. So we think that this is something we can just be really excited by having rail exhibits, having some of these tools recreated there right in the galleries. So again, just to underscore, why are we doing this? Here is our Paleontology Lab down on Starling Avenue with one of our technicians. She's actually prepping out some fossils using a micro jackhammer and a microscope. You'll notice that one of the walls of our Paleontology Lab is completely viewable by the public. So when we're open on weekends, the public can come and actually watch our scientists at work in these galleries, and we plan to do the same thing there. We might even expand on that, maybe have two-way communication. Maybe not all the time, but maybe there can be signs up that might say something like, curious, come ask a scientist about what they're doing. And so the public can come, and by just toggling a switch, they can have a conversation about what they're doing and create that personal connection. Right, here's our newest curator, Dr. Hayden Bassett. He's been on the job for literally about a week, right? But we're really excited to have him. He's been pouring through the pre-planning study and the exhibit narrative in an effort to begin to try to figure out, you know, hey, what kind of unique stories are out there that we can leverage in these galleries? So he's totally excited to be a part of this entire process. I mentioned before Specimens and Artifacts. This is a couple of our collections holding areas. This is our entomology area. We just have row after row of these insect drawers. Here's one that's been pulled out. It's a set of beetles. I don't remember which set of beetles I pulled out here, but in one drawer you can have like 100 specimens. And these are what can be available for us to bring up to Waynesboro, right? Yeah, we got a lot of dead birds here. Now, I just tell you right now, we didn't collect all these. We don't go running around with shotguns, blowing things out of the air, trapping little animals, and killing them just to put them into a drawer. If you look at the tags, you notice each one of these specimens here have a set of specimen labels associated with them. If you look at those tags, Many of those specimens go back to the 1880s, the 1890s, 1900s, 1910s, and 20s. So this is one of our salvage collections. There was a university that was basically just said, we can't afford to store specimens and artifacts anymore. So the museum took these specimens and cataloged them, and they are made available for researchers. That is our forte, our collections, and making them available for researchers. Frankly said, around the world, it is not unusual for us to get requests, obviously from within Virginia or around the United States, but we get a lot of international requests for specimens from professional institutions such as universities and museums. So, but they can also be made available to augment exhibits as well. I show this one here. This is one of my guys. Here's one of our exhibits guys. This is Joe Dillon, right? It looks like he's in the middle of a museum, but he's not. He's in a, I guess you'd call it a mansion. So this guy in Pennsylvania builds this house, right? And I couldn't tell you, it must be, I don't know, 10,000 square feet. I mean, it's huge. It's a monster house. And throughout the house, there are these galleries, these pockets of galleries all throughout. Well, the guy passed away, and even though it was Pennsylvania, the family reached out to us, because we're awesome, of course, right? And reached out to us and said, you know, we got to clean his place out, right? You know, before we can close the estate. Do you want this stuff? Now, there's a lot of stuff that's not appropriate for, say, this particular area, right? We're not going to be interpreting bighorn sheep when we're explaining what Waynesboro is all about. But things like the cougar shark, bobcat, yeah, we can use those. So, but there were just hundreds and hundreds of various mounts and various dioramas and so forth, and just some magnificent pieces. And so we went up and we deinstalled everything that we could get our hands on, and we came back with 2 giant moving trucks, a rather sizable moving van, and it wasn't enough, so we had to rent a climate-controlled storage unit and move the rest of it over there to get the next month, right? And so we have all this stuff kind of archived, just tucked in every nook and cranny, and this is the only collection. I just got a new collection of fossils from Howard University in Washington, D.C. yesterday. It was 22 cabinets. I don't know how many fossils it represents yet. We have to inventory it. But 22 cabinets of fossils from all around the world, right? And this is material, this is research-grade material that has been published and figured in the professional journals and so forth. And so, in anticipation of building a branch museum, we have taken advantage of every opportunity we have to kind of bolster our collections, including those materials that are appropriate for display in public galleries. So we're ready, you know, got to unload some of this stuff. Let's move to the outside, the pretty pictures, right? So just to clear the slide right here, this is Main Street right here, this is Arch Avenue, this is Constitution Park over on the right. So I'm standing in the middle of the South River, a little south of downtown. Glad I wore my boots, right? So, and so we see downtown Waynesboro up here in the background. So again, we have this perpendicular design with the first floor that I've walked you through. Here's the perpendicular second floor. What we haven't gotten to yet is the idea that this shows the kind of Cadillac design. If we can get everything we want into the budget, that, you know, we're talking about having green roofs. That's good ecologically, but it is also very exciting because it's a place where you can have further interpretation of the world that you see beyond the walls of the museum, but also what you see in the green roof structure itself, right? Solar panels, why the heck not? Let's throw those in too, right? So you also see here something that we think could be kind of iconic. We might modify this as we kind of try this out. I mean, museum design is almost like trying on clothes, right? You know, you try it out, see how you feel, maybe you like it. If you don't, you can change it a little bit, right? So we have a lot that we can still modify to fit our needs, but this gives folks a chance to kind of get between floors and up to the green roof, and maybe even have sort of a great view of the viewshed of the South River as it flows through Constitution Park. So this provides us with additional exhibit space as well as event spaces, and we're not just going to stop there. One thing we're proposing is to take boulders from off of, say, around like Afton Mountain, Blue Ridge Parkway, something like that, the Catoctin Greenstone, which tells us so much about the ancient history of the Appalachian Mountains and so forth. Why not take those and tell those stories outside in exterior exhibits and bring those boulders right through the glass wall into the lobby, right, to connect people, to blur the boundary between the inside and the outside of the museum. right? We're talking about having, perhaps terraced areas for lectures and outdoor events and so forth. Imagine if we had, an event going on in Constitution Park with the portable amphitheater down here, right? And people kind of bring their lawn chairs up here as well. I mean, why not? Why not kind of connect these experiences and so forth, right? In the back, we have some modest parking and a bus drop-off area, and also that's where the kind of children's outdoor area is. We may even have some water features on the side and so forth, and then walkways and whatnot that connect directly to Constitution Park. And then we even have some more functional things, like perhaps, should the budget allow it, we could have like a wetland swale over here that would be something that would capture our wastewater, so it would provide that definite positive for water quality locally, but also provide a lot of interpretive possibilities as well. So you got a lot of specific experiences on the inside of traditional museum exhibits, but on the outside, we can do a lot as well. So here's the view. So you're one of these visitors that has expendable income. You got a couple kids in the car, just got off Skyline Drive. Hey, there's a museum down here. You're coming down Main Street, coming right towards downtown. This is the first thing you see after you pass through Constitution Park. You'll see a beautiful design. It's going to get everyone excited. The kids have been in the car for too long going down Skyline Drive and Blue Ridge Parkway. Let's bring them inside. They can learn something. They can, enjoy themselves and so forth and whatnot. And then, of course, you'd like to think that mom and dad would say, well, why don't we stay here? Why don't we pay for a hotel room? We got to gas up the car. There's shopping here. Waynesboro really has it already when you think about it. What I've been told, the three things you need. You need shopping, you need cultural stuff, and what am I missing here? Someone yell out. What do people want? Shopping, cultural, and there's a food. Food, thank you, yes. Yeah, I'm kind of full right now, so I wasn't thinking about food, right? So you got some great restaurants locally. There's some very interesting shopping going on. And when you look at the Wayne Theater, you look at the Waynesboro Heritage Museum, you look at Constitution Park and many other amenities that are right here already, you've already got that going. We feel like we can just come in and complement that and bring even more people in, right? So I think that this is going to be a great two-way street, not just for the city, not just for the region, but also for the Natural History Museum, obviously. So this kind of shows an aerial view of what the green roof experience could look like. It would be a great place it'd be a cool place to set up a wedding or some kind of corporate retreat or something like that, but also it would be a great addition to a tour through the galleries. So I'm showing this here from our friends in Parks and Recreation in the city of Waynesboro, right? They've done a lot of work over time, and they presented this recently. So this is a master plan, showing again what could possibly be. So just to kind of clear where we're at, this is the footprint down here in the lower left of the first floor of the Natural History Museum as we proposed it. Walkways that lead down to the existing Constitution Park and so forth, with the South River flowing through. And so they detailed all these possibilities to make just this wonderful green space that people can go and enjoy, and we would just simply be one part of that, of this overall experience. And so this is something that we could refer to as, say, as the South River Preserve, where we have restored habitats, enhanced put-ins and river access and so forth. So you begin to see just a multiplicity of experiences that people could gain here on top of our cultural experience. So it's a very exciting process. So imagine walking through the South River Preserve and seeing things and getting your mind primed for asking questions, walking through the museum and getting those questions answered, or vice versa. What if you go through the museum first? You become suddenly equipped with new information and new motivation to learn more, and then you go walk through the South River Preserve and South River itself and so forth, and you begin to walk through it with open eyes. So this is extremely exciting. All right, so where are we at with next steps? Let me just check the time. I always want to be polite here. Oh my gosh, this is one of my shortest versions. The last version of this talk lasted 14 hours. We had just peak passing out and stuff, so I just want to make sure I don't do that tonight. So where we're supposed to be in a non-plagued world, right, is July 1st, 2020 to begin what we call detailed planning, which is a regimented 18-month process that is basically defined by the state of what you do and when you do it. So the first Part of it is several months of schematic design. Then you get approvals from the Department of Engineering and Building to make sure that the budget check is right. You're not going beyond budget. Everything's realistic. You then go through the preliminary design, which produces much more detailed drawings. And again, DEB does the budget check and everything. And then you basically approach the General Assembly for funding, and they've already invested so much into you at this point because they already gave us money for pre-planning. We're not exactly sure. They don't tell you until the budget is approved, but we were due somewhere maybe like $800,000 or $900,000 to do this part. And then they ask you for the full funding, and then you get put into the construction pool. And then at that point, you're bidding out a project because you're going to be developing, where is it? Maybe I didn't put it in here, but what you do is you actually, oh, here it is right here. You know, when you're funded, you develop those working drawings, and you get yourself a contractor to break ground. I mean, literally break ground at that point, you get going. So in a pre-COVID world, you figure from July 1st, it's about a 3 to 4 year process. So we could have been open sometime around 2023 or 2024. But at this point, we don't know. The good news is you probably all have already heard is that we survived the governor's budget. He proposed us in there. When that was handed to the House and the Senate, we survived both of those. And so when the final budget was approved, prior to COVID, we were good to go. We were ready to start just rolling this with a lot of momentum. Unfortunately, all capital projects have been put on hold, and that's because of the COVID emergency. So, and we understand that. So we're actually trying to take advantage of this situation. So we have this pause. As I alluded to earlier, we're going to hold various constituent work groups by Zoom to talk about some of the specifics in the exhibits and get input. You know, what more can we do now to refine what our ideas are so we're even more prepared when we do get to this place in the process, I should say. So we're just right now, as everybody is in the state, we're playing the patient waiting game to move forward. All right. So let me just kind of wrap things up. For those of you who've heard my talks or chatted with me personally, let's just review why we're doing this. Why is this a good idea? So, oops. All right, so why a new campus in Waynesboro? So the Virginia Museum of Natural History, we work closely with the with the city government, and we're really in lockstep. We have the same vision. We recognize that our business plans will make for a great experience, and we can run a sustainable operation here. Whereas this is something that we can work mission-based to interpret the unique attributes of the Shenandoah Valley, and provide our education opportunities and so forth, and generate local and state revenue, right? So this is where everybody begins to benefit. And when I talk about great impact, I also talk about great sustainable impact. Again, we are working with a very strict business model here. A lot of times cultural institutions are set up to basically run at a loss, so we can't do that, right? This is something that we have to be able to sustain ourselves with. So, and one of the big things that's going to help us is that tourism draw. 300,000 people are relatively underserved at the top of Afton Mountain every year. The south entrance of the Shenandoah National Park and milepost 0, the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's 300,000 people that traverse that point every year. It's the confluence, the only place in the world that is the confluence of Skyline Drive, Blue Ridge Parkway, and the Appalachian Trail. But we can bring them down working together with you and the existing amenities here and have them impact the economy locally and keep us moving towards great sustainable impact. And one thing that our colleagues that we work with like to talk about is to prepare the next generation of students for STEM careers and to help, in the long run, rejuvenate the economy with a STEM-based job opportunities. So it's mission-based for us, obviously. It creates a draw for citizens, I've already kind of mentioned, and hopefully overall the two-way street comes back to this economic vitality for downtown Waynesboro. Today's investment in our children is the foundation for the industrial revolution of tomorrow. And again, I would argue that we are the people, we are the staff to provide the talent pool to really get this rolling, and we'll recruit people who can do that. So this is just an image of one of our education programs, one of our educators working with the young. I don't know how many times I've seen them, just the kids so engaged in what they're doing, because we provide these hands-on and interactive opportunities to learn about science. So we intend to bring all of that here and recruit local talent and train them to staff our museum here. Waynesboro is a pretty doggone good location because we not only have a willing population here, but we also have other communities such as Stanton, Harrisonburg, Lexington, Buena Vista, Charlottesville, and the various surrounding counties. And we're looking farther than that as well because you've got an active set of hotels locally. This could really be a draw where people come for overnight visits or 3-day visits or week-long visits and have something to do for everybody. Right? So while this might be our primary audience radius, places like Northern Virginia, farther Eastern Virginia, heck, we might even steal a couple of customers from Martinsville who might go up there and want to see what's going on. But I would say that's because we talked them into it. So, all right, and I just like to show this to remind everyone of those 300,000 people. That's like a whole city up there that we could potentially be drawing from. And again, everyone benefits. So with that, I just want to give a lot of thanks to the Center for Cold Waters Restoration. We worked really close with the city. We worked really close with Senator Hanger and Delegate Avoli in the General Assembly and whatnot. But for all these years, the group that has always been with us has been the Center for Cold Waters Restoration, or CCR. They've got this long-term goal to look at economic revitalization that's water-based. That's the way your economy was decades ago. It was the factories that used water, and you had all this water. Well, you can do it again, but you can just have to focus on different kinds of technologies and whatnot. And so, again, if we can get a population of students that are steeped in the sciences early on, you can be STEM ready to go into the training necessary to create a STEM-based economy, STEM and water-based economy. So this is kind of the story of cold waters restoration. They snuck us in here, which I really think is great. But they've always been there. They've connected us with Rotary and Kiwanis, who have funded us. They have found other funding partners for us. They've helped us raise money for everything we've done, from some of our preliminary work, such as our feasibility study and our master plan. They were right there with us, as was the Office for Economic Development in the city of Waynesboro. So I like to tell people that this, this isn't me just coming in and doing this. It isn't just the staff of the Virginia Museum of Natural History, even the staff and the boards, right? But it is the entire community that's gotten together. And so what can you be doing? I'll just kind of finish off with this. What can you be doing at this point? It's really hard to keep momentum. Well, let me rephrase that. It's really easy to lose momentum during a pandemic. We don't have experience during a pandemic, of course, but it seems like really easy just to go put your head under a rock. When I went to the Virginia Museum of Natural History in 2010, we're still in this really terrible recession and stuff, and the attitude at the time was, well, let's just kind of go hide under a rock and ride this one out. And I was like, no, 9, look at my monocle eye, and I was telling you 9, right? We can't do that, right? We have to continue to go out into the community and connect with the community. So if you look at our online resources, I know maybe after months and months of looking at online resources is getting a little old, but we have always looked outward towards the community. That's what we did then to get ourselves out of the funk we were in because of the recession, and that's what we have to do now to continue on. So if you can all act as ambassadors and get people to go to our Facebook page or some of our other social media and look at Ben in Nature or Dr. Pritchard's Stories of Ancient Life and check these things out and share it with others so people understand what we're doing. We're now open to the public just a few days a week on the weekends, and we've got a lot of strict policies in place, just like they have right here at the Wayne Theater. And it seems to be working, but we're continuously pushing to continue along. We've communicated with our members of the General Assembly to say, hey, when time is right, when there's funds available, and we can get right to our detailed planning, we will be ready to take those funds and use them responsibly to come up with an excellent product for the people of the Commonwealth and whatnot. And so while Center for Cold Waters Restoration and the city of Waynesboro have been there for us all this time, I'd like you to be there with us as well to help continue momentum. And when the time comes, please be a partner with us. And we're going to be asking for the community to fund part of this. Just so you know what the breakdown generally is, the state has already given the preliminary thumbs up based upon everything we've talked about, that they will fund the vast majority of this. But the city City of Waynesboro, as you all know, has already created a resolution to commit $1 million in funds and infrastructure towards this project. The VMNH Foundation Board of Directors has agreed to contribute an additional $2 million to add that to what the state will provide. It should get us an excellent product that will complement everything that you here in Waynesboro have already done. So with that, I thank everybody else who has pitched in. I just specifically, want to specifically mention Cox Grade Stack Architects, Rosewell Harwell Landscape Design, Toscano Clemens and Taylor, who are cost estimators, and Quattrofil and Associates, who worked with for many years for developing exhibits. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end things. I'll take a few questions, and I'd be glad to also stick around afterwards and answer some questions one-on-one. So thanks so much for your attention tonight. So anybody have any questions on what we're doing? And just so you know, I never end a lecture without any questions. I've been known to stand up here for 2.5 hours until someone finally came up with one. So I will wait here patiently. You have to have one. Who's it going to be? All the way in the back.
You anticipate again with the 3D printers and some of those things that you had with the other picture?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question in the back was, do you anticipate using 3D printer technology at the location? I'm going to answer that very briefly in 2 ways. One, when we create full reconstructions of, say, like skeletal remains found in the fossil record, we use a tried and true method called molding and casting, where you literally make a silica mold of a fossil, and then you pour this resin into it, that when it hardens, you have an exact duplicate of that. 3D modeling is now, it's not quite there in terms of making that. We've made some replicas that look pretty doggone good. We still use molding and casting. That being said, we're also looking to the future. Now, this is just thinking right now. Like I said, I like big, hairy, audacious goals. And so this is something we're talking about in our region down in Martinsville right now. But if this ever comes close, it's something we can apply up here. 3D printing technology has gotten less and less expensive, year after year. And it's something that's very powerful. What if we had the ability to give every student in the school system, like let's just start with Martinsville, Henry County. What if we were able to give every student in their household access to a 3D printer, and that we had online scans of our specimens and artifacts, and that students had to curate their own digital collection, and that they got their science SOLs through studying these fossils, these reconstructions and so forth, right? But they also could get art SOLs, because a lot of times when you get these 3D prints or casts and stuff, you gotta modify them a little bit, you get the little errors out of them, and then you paint them to look realistic and whatnot. So why the heck not? Why not think like that? So this is something we've been toying with. I don't know where that's going to go, but I mean, why not think big like that? And I think it would be a great complement to a museum visit to have 3D printing technology in the household or at a central location where students could create both their virtual and their physical collection. And I'm just going to bring this up too, because I just think it's bad. This is kind of old now, but I think it was the 1980s. Might be mistaken on that, but it's somewhere around there. That there was a study done on all of the Nobel laureates. What do they have in common? If you won a Nobel Prize, maybe you got something in common with everybody else who's won a Nobel Prize. So they went through this big analysis of these people and the matrix and everything like that, and there was only one thing that came out in common with all of these people. At some point in their lives, they all had collections of something. They collected comic books, they collected rocks and minerals, they collected baseball cards, they collected, I don't know, whatever people collect, right? And when you think about it, it helps with the organization of the mind, the organization of your thoughts and ideas, to create a systematic kind of database that you can use to ask questions, gain data, and answer those questions. So why not get students to develop their own questions and do it in kind of a savvy, modern technology way? Great question. I could go in probably more into it too, but go ahead. All right, anybody else? Alrighty, for those of you who might have some additional questions, I will stick around for a few minutes, and please come down and say hello. We'll socially distance Q&A and that sort of thing. And thank you for all you're doing, and thanks for, since you're here, I'm assuming you're going to keep with us, so thanks for all you're doing going into the future. So have a good night.